2% of construction. So you think about that, 2% of construction costs often results in 98% of our remediation costs. What's really scary about that is we know now there's decennial defect liability insurance, so that's 10-year defect insurance, and they've studied the market, and they've told us that defects in Australia currently cost $2.57 billion a year. So let that sit for you for a second. $2.57 billion a year, Australian homeowners and owners corporations spend simply to get their buildings back to where they were supposed to be in the first place. So there's no improvement, doesn't look any better. They're just getting what they originally paid for, that numerous people in the process cut corners. Whether it's from design cutting corners, builder cutting corners, trades cutting corners, and we end up with this huge, huge gaping hole. So that's a huge dollar figure. And that's the reality and the seriousness of what we're doing and the implications in the market. My favourite there, you'll see that photo. I'm just turning this on. You'll see that photo a couple of times. Is the lapel working? You guys good? So, water stopping. We just see 101 mistakes, doesn't matter where we go. Heaps of studies, there's lots of data that we refer to. We're lucky now, there is a lot of surveys being done, there's a lot of statistics available. Mine is generally New South Wales, but it's Australia-wide. And we even know it's further than Australia-wide, it's New Zealand, Canada, it's numerous other countries having reflected similar issues. So it's a really interesting space to be in. It's developing at a very rapid rate in certain states. Like was touched on now with the VBA, it was legislative powers need to be brought in, and we still have problems. So once OC has been issued, so the occupation is done, land titles, new titles have been issued, the strata subdivision is done, the Commissioner's powers end. So we're still falling apart, we're still falling short. Because of these issues they're reactively legislating, means they can't keep up. So now we've got jobs, we've got huge issues, the Commissioner doesn't have powers to do anything, they're trying to get council now to put fire orders and other things onto newly finished buildings that slip through the cracks. So this is going to take us 20, 30 years to clean up this mess. It's going to be a long mess to clean up, it's huge. So the statistics go on and on, but what is prevalent in all statistics is waterproofing. Whether you look at cladding, you see water, you look at structures, you see water, whatever other type of defect you look at, the water comes into play. So it's a really scary thing, and lucky we're starting to focus on it nationally, and it's becoming an important thing. But like was brought up by Dr. Bayer earlier, the BCA still allows wet basements, but we know most people move into dry basements. The legislation is still always so far behind where we're trying to push things. So it's challenging, because then you get pushback, like I was saying before, waterproofing certificates. You don't need to be a waterproofer to sign it off. There is no legislative requirement to be a licensed waterproofer. So we're navigating this uncharted territory, trying to work with standards and codes that are very difficult at the best of time to understand. They're often conflicting in the same document, definitely conflicting between different documents, which is what we look at. So most defects are simply due to lack of consideration of codes and standards. We've said that all day. People just don't know the code or the standard they're working to. The amount of subbies that will not know the exact Australian standard they're supposed to work to. If you ask a bricklayer, what are the masonry standards? It's AS4773 under 8.5 metres and AS3700 over. They won't tell you the difference. They won't tell you the difference between flashings and weep holes. Most trades do not know their own codes. The amount of times I get a waterproofing certificate and it references the clause in the wrong volume of the BCA. It's a house and they're using the class 2 clauses, or it's vice versa. Units and they're using the house clauses. So this guy's got no idea. He just slapped things down, whatever the certified surveys asked for. So the codes, the Australian standards, when you use them deemed to satisfy provisions in the MCC, are the minimum. It's not best practice. That's actually where we're starting at. Anyone says, oh, that's Australian standards, that I can't get there. If you can't get there, you're a performance solution. You can't just not get there. It's not best practice. Just a little bit about myself. Byron gave you a rundown. So I'm the lowest level of building surveyor, as well as licensed builder and waterproofer. Because in New South Wales, the lowest level building surveyor is the only classification for a building inspector. This means I can inspect and sign off Rio, pre-pour, timber frames, waterproof, and that type of thing. I lecture at university, which is interesting to see the kids coming through, because there's a severe lack, I'd say, in practical teaching, and the Commissioners picked that up through all the universities. So every year I think I'm going to quit because it is a pain having to lecture at night, repeat election notes, commissioners changing legislation, so every year I've got to chuck my old notes out and write new notes. But the feedback I get from the kids saying that I'm one of their few practical lecturers. So you get into all this theory, and I remember when I was at uni as well, your starter bars and your Z bars have all these fancy names, but they don't actually get taught how to build. So I go in with photos, literally my defect reports, and try and teach them how to do things right. They don't get taught simple things like flashings, weep holes, waterproofing. They get very, very limited. I think they get, an architect gets 6 hours of education on moisture protection provisions in a whole degree. So you think about that. No wonder we've got problems. They get taught all the fancy things, how to make it look pretty, but actually how to make it work. In the UK, they've got architects and they've got builders, but in between they've got architectural technologists. It's a separate degree, that's a separate entity that takes the architect's design, makes it practical, works with your fibre cement, your Hebel, whatever building materials you're using, and brings those details together, then it goes off to the builder. We're missing that whole step. That whole entity doesn't exist in our industry. How do things actually go together? And often it's as simple as the architect puts a box, as per AS 3700. Doesn't detail it, doesn't understand how to detail it. Builder gets it. Program's going flat stick, and he's trying to make it work. So it's very challenging, and we're missing a whole step, which is why we have these current issues. So, going back. One of the most common errors, no surprise to anyone, incorrect detailing at the wall-floor junction. So wall-floor junctions are bathrooms, one of the most common failures. It's as simple as masonry grows. Masonry grows up to 0.6 mil per metre. That's why we've got to put control joints every 6 metres. So your brickwork's growing, concrete shrinks. It can shrink it up to 0.2 mil per metre. So if you've ever done your bond breaker right, haven't got your membrane thickness right at that wall-floor junction, surprise, surprise, the membrane tears. It's not rocket science, but again, people don't understand how the building material they're using move and how they work. Hebel, autoclave aerated concrete. Great product, but it's got air holes in it. That's what's so light. You can throw a piece of Hebel in your hand. It's like a sponge. If you're going to use it in a wet area, mate, you've really got to have your design out of that because it's going to suck water up. Some of them got bits of rear in it. The rear is going to corrode. Water stop angles. You saw my first slide. I'm still amazed we're still struggling to get water stop angles right with the bathroom material. Like it's 101 in construction. T1 waterproofer, T1 builder is where I got that photo from. Where was it? So back a few. They rang me, they said, no, we're done, Stan, we've got it right. All that happened there, the water stop angle is higher than the door jamb. No one could bother putting a little notch in, so they just lobbed it off there. And that was, they'd done their ITPs, the waterproof had signed the ITP, builder signed the ITP. Told me on that site there was a distinct lack of care for getting it right. And that's big name builder waterproofer. One of the biggest, it's a national waterproofer, let's put it that way. Try and do the right thing as well. He was up in arms at his own installers, but we've just got really bad education. Insufficient falls, we're going to look at that in the NCC. First time now, the Australian standard used to say, water has to fall to avoid ponding. The NCC now tells us, you need 1 in 80. So there's no more no ponding. 1 in 80 is 12 mil per metre. We're going to design that in. It's going to be hard to achieve. Membrane thickness. You'll see most waterproofing consultants love sheet membranes. I'm personally as a builder, love sheet, and now as a consultant, love sheet. Your thickness is predetermined. It takes one of the critical defects out of the equation. Yes, liquids are great, and I still use liquids, but to avoid that defect, the sheet membrane is done in thickness. It costs a hell of a lot more to buy, so people will then often take more care with it. So the membrane thickness, when it's too thin, obviously it fails. Too thick, but creates its own problem. You get pinholing, which is outgassing. The membrane becomes less elastic. You can make a class 3 membrane a class 2 if you do it too thick. So then your bond breaker might not be enough and it'll tear. So you've really got to know liquid membranes. They're much harder and require a lot more knowledge to work with correctly. But often we've got the guys who have less knowledge using the harder product. And then we have liquid membrane fails. It's not the liquid membrane's failure or shortcoming. The installer got it wrong. Puddle flanges and water stops. Again, most people still don't know how to work with puddle flanges properly, correct primers, that type of thing, which we're going to look at. So, the market at the moment, I don't tell anyone who's all in it. We've got people going break left, right and centre. Defects litigation through the roof. Material prices, you can see that. This is from Master Builders Australia. This is National Material Index pricing. Well, effects of COVID, and almost daily in the news we're seeing builders go broke. So it is the perfect storm, and the guys weathering it, good on you for having a go. But it is very, very challenging times right now and for the next short-term foreseeable future. So the NCC used to be 4 books. We went on with that, it was great. Volume, the first is a guide how to use it, building code, plumbing code. Nice and easy to use. We all understood the numbering. The numbering was similar back from 1988 when it was first written. So it was nice. We all sort of understood what our obligations were. Now we get this new one. Change the numbering so we're all confused. We've got the housing provisions, which is great. I'll delve into housing provisions in a minute. We've got livable housing, which I'm going to look at. But we've got a lot more books, a lot more information to get through. So they extracted out the housing provisions, which James touched on, the specification. We're going to look at that. But basically, that you could build a house theoretically without opening Australian standards, because it's the housing provisions used to be in there. So the part of the NCC that told you corrugated roof had to be 5 degree pitch, clip lock roof could be 1 degree pitch. Told you about your footings, your vapor barrier. It described all those practical details being extracted into another book. So that book's actually really good to use. And I tell my uni students, read that book. Don't read the whole NCC. If you can just get the understandings out of the housing provisions, it's applicable to all building classes, theoretically, even though practically it's not. And then the plumbing code, I'm not going to get into that today at all. Then we've got 4 other books. These 4 other books you need to follow when you're working with the NCC. So NACA's heating and cooling load limits, whole of house energy efficiency factors, livable housing, which I'm going to talk about a little bit, and fire safety verification. So these 4 books are part of meeting compliance with the NCC. So these ones you need to know and you need to comply with. So we are 1, 2, books, 3 with the plumbing code, 4 with the housing provisions, 4 here, so we're at 8 books, and then attached to it there's 20 handbooks. So I haven't even started, I've saved them all, earmarked them to read. I'm not going to get through them. Like there's 20 handbooks. These are not mandatory compliance. These are guides on how to meet your compliance. But man, acoustics, energy, air quality, lifts, landslides, building upgrades, everything's in there. So all I suggest is at least download them. And if you have a relevant job, maybe then you'll open a relevant guide. And I'd hate to think how complicated they are. Like, I've got to read the building upgrade, that's my next one to read, but mate, who has time? We've all got to work and make money in between doing all this research and reading. So it is challenging. So livable housing. Questions on when it comes into play, because it is intricate. I'll palm off to the building surveyors, VBA and James. So if you've got when, because it looks like it comes into play almost everywhere type of thing. So it is very complicated. That's the forward. So again, download this book yourself. It's actually really easy to read. This one's brilliant. Really easy for the builder and the end user. Livable housing, basically got AS 1428 to disabled housing. We all know what a disabled bathroom is. Livable housing is sort of somewhere in between to your standard construction. It's acknowledging that Australia's got an ageing population, got people with disabilities and people who are temporarily disabled. So trying to make homes easier, circulation spaces, access and egress for aged and disabled people, also ease of upgrade for a disabled person in the future, for a disabled purchaser. So it is a good thing. We've got 3 levels of rating. We've got platinum, the highest level, gold, silver. Basically, there's X amount of codes. This needs 7 levels of compliance, so you've got to do 7 items, 15 items, I think 23 items out of the guide to get compliance with those different levels. Your architect draws to a level, an independent design person stamps it that it complies with the silver level. All I pulled out is the bathroom sections. I haven't worried about, it talks about your driveway, 1 step-free entry to the property. So then that brings in strip entry, waterproofing wise. You've got to have a strip drain if you've got level. So it takes a lot of thought to get all this stuff right. Basically you need a toilet on the ground floor, 1200 wide for gold. Removable shower screen, so the shower screen needs to have the possibility of being removed in the future. And you need provision in the wall for grab rails, so literally blocking plywood or 12mm thick FC sheet walls. So it needs to have the potential to add grab rails in the future. The showers are slip resistant, hobbless. The shower increases as the level goes up. The size of the shower physically increases. And the walls that have the nogging or blocking installed. I know as a builder, we just used to ply that wall. It was easier than trying to sit there and set it out. You just get your thin ply and just ply over the stones. So that's livable housing. So something everybody needs to download that guide, look into it, because it's here to stay. It's in the ABCB. It's been brought into Victoria. We did get a kickback in time in New South Wales. They've not adopted it at all. Other states have pushed it back. So we don't have to worry yet in New South Wales, but you guys do. So what I was touching on before, we know we've got to comply with the BCA. The performance requirement is an external wall will not leak. A bathroom will not leak. And there's two ways we can comply. Deemed to satisfy provisions. That's Australian standards. A is 3740, A is 4654 for external. We do it, our Australian standards that are referenced. We meet this, we meet that. Once you don't comply with those, you're in performance solution territory. This is where your code mark certificates, your manufacturer's specifications, and your tailored project solutions sit. So it's either Australian standards or your performance solution. Just because you meet the performance requirement, somebody says it doesn't mean it's true. They do that at the legal end. I haven't reached the performance requirement. But at construction phase, or you're going for your construction certificate phase, you need to prove compliance one way or another. So performance solution, Dave's going to go more into that, but there is a whole process. There is a book on it. There's one of those guidelines on how to do a performance solution. So there is, I have skipped that book. But there is a whole process. I'm doing a performance solution where you need stakeholder engagement, manufacturers, analysis and testing and outcomes. So you really, if you want to go that, it's hard. It's easier just to go DTS. Make the DTS work, get your architect to work with you, modify the design. Because once you're on performance solution, you've got to make sure that your architect's hit it in his design, your builder knows about it, it's got a layout sheet on his program. If it's a bathroom, your gyprocker's got to know about it, your waterproof's got to know about it, your tiler's got to know about it. It's like you need to do a full day workshop for the trades for that job, because they're going to be thinking Australian standards at best, if they're not thinking about just slap it down. So then you've got to try and retrain your project staff to hit that performance solution. So I try and stay away from them as much as I can. Students conformity. Everyone sees them, great documents. Whether it's James Hardy, any of the manufacturers outside, this means that manufacturer's gone off and tested their product. You can see in the top right here, it tells me it complies to the BCA 2016 Amendment 1. So that's the BCA they've tested to. These are the clauses they've tested to. So that tells me if I work as per this code mark and the 30 pages behind it of the technical details, I comply with the performance requirements. So your certifier wants to know the product's compliant, the surveyor. So that will go as part of your documentation for your job. But what is important that everyone misses is the 30 pages behind it. You'll see people don't then install as per the manufacturer's spec, get to the end of the job, building surveyor does inspection, what's going on there, can't find the detail, code mark no longer applies. You're at the end of the job, trying to get an OC, trying to retrospectively do a performance solution that may not work. There's multiple jobs now in Sydney where the commissioners pick that, not installed as per manufacturer's spec, they can't get a performance solution, and you're about millions of dollars of rework at the end of the job. They're trying to get an OC, trying to do the lodge with the Land Titles Office to get all the pre-purchases converted to actual sales. It quickly makes everybody kill each other. So code marks are crucial, and people don't pay enough attention to them. They just care the product is code marked. Yes, it's code marked, but now you've got to make sure every trade on site works to that code mark. So this is where we go, our DTS provisions. Wet area construction must be water resistant or waterproof in accordance with specification 26. I'll give you a look what that looks like. It's that old table we used to have in the previous NCC, talking about showers, hobs, this, that. That's become a written specification in the NCC. And, so you can see I highlighted red and, comply with AS 3740. So you can see the ands there. Somebody's got to tick one box and tick the next box. It's not either or, it's tick, tick, and. So previously we had 2019 NCC, we had one section. Now we've got 3 sections for the same thing. More information. More information is great, but means you've got to know it, you've got to work with it, your manufacturer suppliers need to know. It does create some good things. James touched on that, I've highlighted in yellow. We know these clauses are new. So we know now you can't do an exposed joint, so that's really a control joint in a podium slab run through a planter box with water feature or similar part of the building. So you can't no longer do a structural control joint through a bathroom or a planter because you can't get to the layout. Once it tears, you've got huge issues in ripping stuff apart to rectify. So your structural engineer and architect need to work together to locate the control joints, commonly in the podium slab, mainly when it happens, especially got a few towers going on. So that's a new clause. Roof and wall cladding, like James said, now we have DTS provisions. Previously, external cladding was all performance solution or sort of just ignored. Everyone's worked the manufacturer spec, no one really looked at it. Now we have masonry, Hebel, and metal cladding. We have discussions about water resistant and waterproof. So waterproof means the material does not allow water to penetrate it. Water actually can't go through it. So water resistant restricts moisture movement. So you can say things like your concrete additives, they call it waterproof, they're not really, but they are water resistant. They will stop the moisture coming through the slab, you know, they'll slow it down. So waterproof means it's going to deflect it. And like we heard earlier, you want to guide water, we don't want to fight water. Fighting water, rocks and mountains lose to it. We're always going to, we want to guide it, we want to encourage it to go to where we want it to go. We don't want to fight it. On the left there, we've got changes that walls adjacent to vessels must be water resistant, laundry floor and walls have to be water resistant and waterproof at joints, and bidets. I've got the whole section on bidets. I didn't realize bidets were so important or so common, but that's a great whole section. Frameless and frame shower screens, it's still a mess. It hasn't got any easier, but at least we're consistently waterproofing 1800 high. So that's a good thing. So now we get to volume 2. So volume 2 is our houses. You see straight away the numbering changes. We're at 10.2, 10.2.1. These 10.2s are common because that's where our waterproofing comes into play. Building elements in wet areas within a building must be protected with a waterproofing system. What's a pity, nowhere has anyone defined waterproofing. So no one's defined waterproofing. So we don't actually have a definition. Our legislation talks about waterproofing. It's a serious defect, major defect, depending on what you look at. There's no definition. Actually, I was telling Nicole in the break, I used her definition from a paper years ago. Her definition, and Standards Australia does have reference to it in a non-mandatory document, but we're suing left, right and centre over something we don't even have a definition for. So we've got the housing provisions and 3740. So you're going to work to one. And this is only if you're doing houses, class 1 or 10. So class 2 have to use specification 26 and 3740. Building houses, you can choose one or the other. And there's reasons to go one way or the other way. So housing provisions, like I said before, tell you how to build a house. Your footings, your masonry, your site prep, your structure. So they're great. We get into the wet area details. You'll see there, you've got a 25mm set down for your shower. It's a pretty big set down. The bottom left one's pretty interesting. And I'm going to go into that on the next slide. But that's where you've got it 1.5 minimum away from your shower outlet, and there's your bathroom outside. So that's where your open shower. And then here's the common one. This 5mm is interesting. Because when you're working to livable housing, it's a maximum of 5mm. Here it's a minimum of 5mm. So it means we have to be precise with our 5mm. You don't get an option. Because then if this frame gets removed, we comply with livable housing if we're 5mm or less. But to get this detail to comply during construction, we need to be 5mm. So we really need to be aware of how these codes, it's like nobody read the other guy's code when they wrote it. So this detail I spoke about. So I've got some pretty smart builders that read the codes, and this one was a building surveyor, bring me up. He goes, this guy's been a smart ass, telling me off. He reckons he can install the water stop at the entry of the bathroom, because it's minimum 1500 away, and he can stick it on over the membrane because of that bottom clause. Part 2, at doorways where the height of the tiling needs to be adjusted for tiling purposes, the angle must be fixed with sealant compatible with the waterproofing membrane without damaging the waterproof system. This guy's smart, he's read it. And he goes to me, I told him, you need to sign it off. If you sign off, I'm happy. So I didn't say no to the builder. I just said, can you show me what manufacturer you're using that allows the water stop to be retrofitted over your membrane? So try and just work as simply as you can to the way we should. Because it's hard enough. Like, you can't even get it to the stands. These people trying to dance up, mate. You can get to the stands, I'm happy. These guys are trying to outsmart it. Then we get to drainage flanges. So we've got the NCC drainage flanges, A is 3740, leak control flanges. Again, they're not speaking the same language. But basically, you can see you can have them surface mounted, you can have them rebated depending on the class and how you're working, a typical bond breaker detail. Materials for flooring. So in volume 2, so housing, you can still use particle board outside of a shower. I think anybody who's using particle board in their wet area is mad, considering Skyline isn't that big a cost overrun. Because you've got to do the shower in Skyline. You know, you set your things down, they're different thicknesses, why would you try and change? So even though you can still use particle board in a wet area, it's madness too. Brings us to this really interesting thing, but we have now a maximum and a minimum fall in a floor. So building surveys now, I've had 3 ring me. Stan, what's the best digital spirit level I can buy for my guys? How do I do it? What size? I've recommended them 1200 Bosch digital. Bosch is my favourite because they calibrate, they stay calibrated. The other brands lose calibration. I've told them get a 1200 for your balconies and get a 600 for your showers. So now those building surveys are checking your falls. So it's going to get really interesting when people aren't getting their falls, because 12 mil per metre is a lot. And the architects aren't designing it. Architects aren't thinking, when I step into the bathroom, I've got the strip drain at the back of the shower, so I'm 6 metres off. 6 times 12 equals 72 mil fall, plus my thickness. We're going to see huge issues here now happening. So architects have really got to get on board and start considering the falls in their design. What's great in New South Wales, with the Design Building Practitioners Act, we have to draw a section through the bathroom and show compliance. But that's the only state doing it. So that section through the bathroom, quickly, I give it back to the architect, and there was this massive toe basher going into the bathroom. The architect's freaking out. I'm like, well mate, you pick the drain, NCC tells me it falls, I've got no control over it. Oh, let's go performance solution. Okay, performance solution is back to 1 in 100. You know, maybe 1 in 150, but really, like, leave your drain. So architects have really got to come on board with floor drains, bathroom layouts, how it all works. Tiles, tile sizes, cut-in tiles, you know, large format tiles, single floorways really hard, large format tiles should be strip drains. So class 1 buildings, puddle flanges may sit on top of the concrete, other floors must be recessed. Byron touches on this in his training, I think he's touching on it today, but most FC manufacturers don't allow you to rebate your puddle flange into FC. So again, we've got to think about all these things, how we come together. Might be as simple as just emailing the manufacturer, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, is it okay? Anybody questions you, manufacturers ticked it. Yeah. Class 2 to 9 buildings must be recessed into a substrate. Bathtubs. Run for built-in bathtubs. It's so hard to get them right because trades simply haven't been taught. You speak to a tradesman 60 years plus, they get it. Somehow it's just disappeared. Everyone, either they do the wall, they stick it and they tile onto the top of the upturned lip, or they stick it over the tile. This rebating, waterproofing, upturned lip, architects don't understand it, forget it. I redesign bathrooms with freestanding baths because they can't get it right. Architect sends it back, says, no, I don't like your detail, I want the bathtub my way. And they've set the bathroom 1500 tile to tile, and the bathtub's 1500. So how's the builder ever going to rebate it? He's got to start throwing channel and battening walls off to get this overlap. So built-in bathtubs, all I say is alarm bells should go off. How are you going to get it right? How are you going to get it right on site? So as a builder, we'd build them over and we have varying depth throwing channels because you're never going to get it spot on. So it's easier to use different size throwing channels to get your tile and waterproofing over that upturned lip. So your waterproofing and your wall lining comes into this lip. And then you've got to get this angle turned up. And then you've got to sit your bathtub over that upturned angle. It's very difficult. Doesn't matter whether you use housing provisions or 3740. Both are similar, difficult details. Bond breakers. So housing provisions, bond breakers, everyone knows what they are. The top line is very interesting. Where a screed is used in conjunction with a waterproof membrane, the membrane can be above or below the screed. So the reason this is critical, because when we get to 3740, you'll see it's got same level of confusion. But at least in housing provisions, the substrate to the membrane does not need full. 3740 does. Waterproofing's got to extend up 25 mil above the finished floor level of the surface. Water stop angle must be installed from substrate top and tile. Bond breakers are required to all junctions. When you're the reason I've got the bond breaker everywhere, because when you're waterproofing over screed, you've really got to think about the bond breaker you're using. We're kind of those big ugly ones there. If we're waterproofing over screed, we've got to put tiles. So again, you've got to think of this from the start. So this all starts at design phase. If the builder's thinking about this, when the waterproofer shows up, too late. You're going to have so many things you've got to try to work out on the fly. You're going to get lots of issues. 3740. So that's the old one, the new one. It's got lots of pretty colours throughout the document, so the pictures are great. So, I've highlighted in yellow the words. Normative means you must. Informative means for information, you should. So normative, think normal, so it's normal to do it, unless you perform a solution. Shall is a must, so shall, and then should, optional. Should means you should where you can do it. May is optional. And typical. So typical is only defined the external waterproofing code. Internally it's not. The details illustrated in the figures of this section are typically acceptable methods, not to be interpreted as precluding use of other methods. So the drawings aren't mandatory. This is how you should do it. You can do it otherwise as long as you meet all the other requirements of the document. So the new 3740, we've got more extensive waterproofing requirements, choice of substrates, more design options, editorial changes. The diagrams are really good and they are colourful, so you can snip it, send it off to your waterproofer, to your architect. They are much easier to read, even though I was joking about it. Polished concrete, we're not performance solution anymore. We can now do polished concrete under the DTS provisions. Considerations and solution, the appendixes. We're going to get into the appendixes. They're really good to 3740. Pity that they're informative only. They're not mandatory. So here we've got our leak control flange. So you'll see leak control flange, you need a bond breaker. Like I was saying before, your concrete's shrinking, your PVC is obviously going to move at a much different rate. You need a bond breaker around the perimeter of it. That's why when you go through a basement underneath, you can always see the water coming around, the efflorescence coming around the floor waste, because the membrane's torn at the junction with the puddle flange. So puddle flange, bond breaker, and a non-porous primer. You can't use the same primer you used on your concrete onto your puddle flange. Concrete's porous, PVC obviously repels. So puddle flanges themselves, that's a lot to think about, a lot to get across to your concrete who's got to cast it in and get it flat. Your waterproof has got to get the bond breaker and the primer right, and then your tiler's got to get his falls to it. So it is pretty complicated. And they shall be recessed. 3740, they're always flush. So as a builder, I knew easier to try to cast them all in, knowing 1 in 10 some big Maori bloke's going to stand on, it's going to be like that. At least we only have to core and fix 1 in 10. Guys go and retrofit all of them. I think it's a lot of cost, a lot of work. Each builder's got to work out what suits them. Big difference here, 15 mil shower set down. Housing provisions, 25 mil shower set down. The rest of the details are fairly similar. You can see you've got your 1500 out. So again, we've got the 1500 out, the water stop to the surface, membrane up. So the same type of detail there. The only difference with the hob, it's actually got a taper on it, which is great. The water should fall back into the shower area. One thing you'll notice here on the top left, sealant is on the outside of the frame shower screen. Housing provisions has both sides of the shower screen. Never do both sides because then you get that condensation mold, you get the black mold on the back of your silicon. It's a pain to get out. 3740 only has it on the outside. So water gets in, hits the sealant, goes back into your shower area. We have our lovely bathtub details again. Super complicated. You can see there how hard that top left is. I call the one on the right the tissue box. Architects love it. Undermounting the bathtub to the stone on top. We previously never had a detail. We now have a detail, but again, you're really going to want to know what you're doing. You got your membrane, you got this impervious water-resistant solid packing. That'll be like an ardent impervious liquid, engineered something. Membrane over the top again. So if you're going to do that built-in bathtub, really consider it. Think about it, work on it, have a shop drawing done, because then you've got to get that across to every trade working on it. Gyprocker, plumber, waterproofer, whoever's doing your impervious water-resistant solid packing. So numerous people are working on that detail. So it's going to be really hard to get that right. Membrane installation, so falls in the substrate. So you can see in green I've highlighted it and it goes on. The membrane shall be applied to a substrate with a minimum 1 in 100 fall. So your membrane has to have fall on it now under 3740. So 1 in 100 to your screed, but then you need 1 in 80 to your finished floor level. So obviously that 1 in 100 is the minimum, because you're going to have to do 1 in 80 if you want to direct stick your tiles on top and get compliance with the NCC that requires 1 in 80. If you make your whole bathroom an unenclosed shower, some people are going to try to be smart. Let's get around the drains and the water stops. Let's call the whole thing a shower. The membrane should be over the screed if the whole thing's a shower. But if the whole thing's a shower, then I've got building surveys saying I want 1800 waterproofing to the entire room. So again, people trying to outsmart it and they get themselves stuck. So if you're doing anything outside of the norm, step 1, get it drawn. Step 2, building surveyor to stamp those drawings as part of your full construction set. So from day 1, it's stamped, and then you've got to communicate that to all your trades. Membrane installation for tile screed. Where a tile, bed or screed is used, the waterproof membrane shall be installed above or below the screed. So you can see the conflicting information we've got through, which every job basically needs a design to consider this, how it's going to come together. What are my tiles? What are my set downs? What are my falls? What are my drains? How does it all come together? There's no one size fits all. Falls in a membrane substrate shall be a circular back, 2.3.1. So falls go back to 1 in 100, but go back to the NCC, we're 1 in 80. So sorry for the confusion. This is what you guys have got to work with every day. So that's what I'm suggesting. Waterproof design per job solves all this up front. You're not retrospectively knee-jerk trying to solve it. You're waterproofing over your screed. We're going to have issues trying to get these across the line, especially we've got thin tiles. We've got tiles down to 6 mil. Try and get your bond breaker. So now we're going more with the tapes, which again, you still need a thicker notch trowel to get over that little rib you've got happening with your tapes at your wall floor junction. So again, this just highlights you need to consider your finishes, where your membrane layer is, what your bond breaker detail is. My favourite water stop. So then we're membraning, say we're membraning over screed theoretically. We're going over screed. It's easier, we get our falls 3740. We've still got our water stop angle that has to encapsulate the screed. So then we've got our water stop angle that has to encapsulate the screed. Even though my membrane lays up here, I need to have waterproofing here, just like that drawing. So my water stop angle requires a strip of waterproofing, and then the bottom of my walls require a strip of waterproofing. That's because that's a Hardy's detail. James Hardy, BGC, whoever buy your wall sheeting from, will not warrant their wallboard having a screed against it, a wet screed. Because that screed, A, it's porous when it's placed. B, you get a puncture through the membrane, that screed's going to suck water up the base of the wall. So you'll see every manufacturer shows their wallboard being waterproofed or above screed. So this details here one of our designs. The builder wants the membrane over screed only. We have a bandage of membrane at the water stop angle, and that bandage goes around the room. But in saying that, that bandage was the flashing. We used to flash walls 30, 40 years ago. You'd flash your wall floor junctions. That stopped. So we're just going back, we've got to flash the wall floor junction, membrane over screed. So here you can see the type of details you got from different manufacturers. But the membrane is always protecting the wallboard, or the board is outside the screed. So again, construction sequencing. That goes back, work it out at the start, don't sort out when your gyprocker shows up. Compliance and testing under 3740. So this now is fairly common in New South Wales, electronic leak detection. I think we've got about 25 machines floating around Sydney. It's a little, they're bristles, you connect up to the earth, you wipe a brush over, it throws a spark where it earths. So where there's a hole in the membrane, throw a spark, you get a texture, you circle it. Whether it's sheet membrane, liquid membranes, that's fairly common. Common practice tier 1, now coming to tier 2. We are doing like aged care, service providers, that kind of thing, who own the asset for 30 years. They're getting us to come out and do leak detection. The next one is your ultrasonic thickness. So that tells me membrane thickness by layer. Layer 1, primer coat, coat 1, coat 2, 474. Common readings are 500, 800. Manufacturers typically require 1,200 to 1,500. That's my problem with liquid. No one ever puts it on correctly. And then you've got windows to put on. If I come in a week later, gyprocker's got gyprock dust down, it's half thickness, you imagine how hard that's going to be now to clean. Reactivate means that you've got to make it soft again, put additional coats on. This is just a simple, my son's into ants. He's got this little ant torch. I went and bought one for myself. That's a pinhole. Pinholes throughout membranes. It means they put on a hot substrate or they put on too thick. The gas, the solvents inside, popped out the top. So there's a lot to get right with liquids. And that's our famous seal comb outside. I'm sure you guys are all across the seal comb, measuring your corners. So our testing, membrane continuity testing. So that's now that electronic leak detection I was talking about with the brushes is in 3740 Appendix C. Tells us how to do it, what we should expect. Appendix E tells us materials compatibility. Now you can go to any of the manufacturers outside and they'll give you from your concrete curing compound, your primer, your waterproofing, your engineered screed, your grouts, your sealants, the whole thing, proven compatibility. So under the Design Building Practitioners Act, what James touched on, we do a schedule in our design documents of all the materials we're going to use, and they're all tested and confirmed for compatibility by the manufacturer. The amount of times you see product failure, it's very rarely the product. It's normally there's a contaminant under it that's caused the failure. And testing for moisture content in the substrate, you need to know it. Really crucial if you're doing vinyl, waterproof wet areas, really crucial for that. And other building materials, obviously green concrete. Check your moisture content, high moisture content. You need to tell your manufacturer and look at possibly going an epoxy primer. Appendix D of 3740, beautiful checklist. Tells you your substrate, your water stops, your drainage flange. We've turned this into a digital ITP. So when we do our waterproof inspections, I had my own one that I would give clients, but now we work with this off the iPad, populate photos, populate comments. Gives the industry uniformity. We're all looking at the same thing. I get engaged on a job, I send it off to the builder and say, this is what I'm going to check when I do my bathroom inspections. So everyone's above board. There should be no surprise to anyone when you do a bathroom inspection. So that brings us to project-specific specifications. Every manufacturer out there will give you a project-specific spec. So that takes a lot of burden off everyone. It ensures compatibility. It ensures, say, colder climates, you can't use liquid membranes sometimes. Winter in Melbourne, I'll guarantee if you read your technical data sheet, some of the liquids your guys are applying, you'll be outside of the manufacturer's windows. They may never go hard. You know when you walk on a membrane and it's still tacky a week later, you're thinking, oh, why? That's because the substrate was too cold when you put it down. So talk to your manufacturer every job, get a project-specific spec, check your UV stability, your sealants, your grouts, your thicknesses, your substrate prep, and the manufacturers, all these guys here will also come out to site. They'll meet with the architect, the builder, whoever you need them to meet with, and they'll work with you on the job. They realise now it's a partnership. It's no longer buy the product and adios, it's a partnership with them. And as a builder, pick your favourite 2-3 manufacturers, 1-2 waterproofers, and come up with just systems that your company uses. This job, this type of product, that's the guy, go to, ring him. Get them out to site, and they will come to site. Pavers on pedestals, I'm touching on that. If you're going to do it, check with your building surveyor. It's 50-50. Some surveys allow it without a performance solution because I've done numerous jobs where it meets the mandatory parts of 4654 external waterproofing. Other surveys are saying, no, I want a performance solution. The big thing with the pavers, the gaps here, they're pretty easy because they're predetermined. The problem we always find is everyone goes hard on here. You need an 8 to 10 mil gap. There's a British standard for this installation that generally we go to, 10 mil gap to all fixed elements. Because it doesn't matter what surface tension you get with the water, it'll always drip down the 10 mil gap. Means you don't need your freeboard. We can have those flush transitions because we've got the structural rebat underneath, but we need that 10 mil gap to the perimeter. But again, check with your hydraulic or civil engineer. You may need to have that marked up on the drawings. You may need a performance solution. So again, communication. Communicate to all parties what you're doing, how you're doing it. Another thing just to think about, which I drill into everyone, whether you're doing roofing, whether you're doing waterproofing, whatever you're building, over and under flashing. Simple roofing term. Water will always flow downstream. Everything should be over and under flashed. This is a detail 20 years ago drawn up by master builders. External membrane up, DPC over. Simple. That won't leak. The water will always flow downstream. So always think we're always guiding water. Like Bayer said earlier, don't fight it. We want to just encourage it to where we want it to go. And if you're always over and under flashing, you won't have an issue. I did a job, huge nursing home, leaked like a sieve, 8 years old. All we did, we took up all the membrane, and the membrane had failed but had backfill. So all the membrane went up, we put in 150 core overflows, huge topping with falls, no waterproofing, the building stopped leaking. The client was over the moon, they're like, you're halfway through your job, we had a massive storm, the building didn't leak without waterproofing. Because the falls were so great, the water never sat, ran to the drains, it got away. So waterproofing, you're not trying to fight it, we're just trying to get it away faster. You can see the problem here, but they've waterproofed over the DPC blocked weep hole. That's what happens on the inside. This job's been on the news a couple of times. But that's how the builder thinks it's correct. He abused me, I ended up having to walk off the site because I didn't know what I was talking about. That's how you build. A little bit about AS3958. So AS3958 is not, it's a tiling standard. It's not mandatory in that it's not referenced by the National Construction Code. So standards are never mandatory until the NCC brings them in. Your external and internal waterproofing are brought in, tiling is not. So tiling therefore is a suggestive guide. So you don't have to work to it. But if you don't work to it and you've got defects, it's what someone like me uses and says, this guy did whatever he wanted, not as per the guide, that has resulted in the defects, tiles cracking, tiles popping at control joints. You need your perimeter control joints. you need your intermittent control joints. Spot fixing, don't do it. The reason you don't spot fix, you get a tile, 4 dobs on the back, put onto waterproof membrane. That membrane is not, it's going to peel off. I've actually got tiles where the tiles come off and taken the patch of membrane. The membrane's not designed for point loads. It's designed for a trowel, uniform load. There is stone guys who will spot fix external to a block wall, no waterproofing, and they use pins and spot fixing. Different kettle of fish. If the substrate's waterproofed, you need to have uniform glue over it. Otherwise, your waterproof manufacturer will probably not warrant the waterproofing. So again, know your products, work with your manufacturer. You're not sure, call your manufacturer out, call your consultant out. Wet areas need 90% glue adhesion. So that means not only do you trowel it on the wall, you back butter the tile and then you put it up. That's how you get your 90%. And again, if water's not in the back of it, you don't get your efflorescence coming out because efflorescence is water in, water out, drawing salts from the substrates back out. Control joints. It's my pet hate because I still see it every job. Cut your screed. If you don't cut your screed, your control joint does nothing other than allow the tiles to pop at that point. That's all it does, it encourages popping. Because your screed can't move, your tiles are trying to move. Like we said before, cement retracts. Imagine terracotta tiles, they grow, and we get popping tiles. So all joints have to go through screed, perimeter and intermittent. So no, yes, pretty straightforward. Masterbuild's waterproofing guides, I've got that up. We are rewriting them. Book 1 should be relaunched mid next year. And then we're progressively working through all of them just to bring them up to the standards. As a builder, I had all 4 on site, every job site. Because I tell all my boys, find the detail in there. Even if it's not 100%, let's start there. It's pretty easy. Your bricklayer comes, you want to do a flashing. Your waterproofer comes, you want a waterproof detail. Don't reinvent the wheel. 90% of the details you will need to use are in those books. It's hard enough trying to get to that, let alone hand sketching it, scribbling it on the whiteboard, somebody wipes the whiteboard off, shit, what are we doing again? Try and live by manufacturer spec, Australian standards, industry guides. They're published. If something goes wrong, at least it wasn't you just making it up as you go along. So try and stick to it. That's the QR code for the questionnaire at the end. I believe they're going to put it around the place. So at the end, whoever wants CPD, that's the QR code to scan and fill out your questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, mate.